Hi, Carolina. So this is always one of my favorite sessions here is to talk and reflect back a little bit on the Phocuswright conference, which just happened last month. And we've talked a lot about the theme of the conference, which was travel's renaissance. And during the during the November conference, we briefly kind of looked back and reflected at the last, you know, 20 months or so. But importantly, we refocused our efforts on the future, and we talked about a health and safe environment, an improved travel experience, revitalized destinations, streamlined processes, faster response time. So all of these kind of positive things that we're all looking at. Um, at the conference, the first day, as it always does, focuses on startups and young leaders, and also our innovation summit and launch. And the second and third days featured our center stage program, our breakout sessions, and small group topical roundtables. The fourth annual startup program was once again a huge success, and we welcomed over 50 early stage startups with some of our industry's most experienced operators and investors. And our Young Leaders Summit, which has been around for over a decade now, included 40 of our industry's most promising future stars who networked and met with some of the biggest names in the business, including Kayak's Steve Hafner, TripAdvisor's Steve Kaufer, Saber's Tracy Mercer, Google's Nelson Boyce, and Hopper's Fred Lalonde. And we actually partnered with Sinet and welcomed a young leader from Mexico to join us during the Young Leaders Summit. So that was a great part of the program this year. I'd say the most important part of the conference, as it always is, was the networking. And it was amazing to be together with 750 of our industry's leaders. The networking was a big part of the event, and it was great to see so many meetings taking place at the receptions, at the bar in the evening, and during the course of the day. In many ways, the Phocuswright conference was about ramping up and hearing each other's stories and planning for a full recovery in 2022, 23, or maybe 24, depending upon your outlook. And there's so much optimism in the US as the US opened borders in early November, and more than a quarter of our attendees were from outside of the country, which was really an amazing surprise. But as we celebrated, parts of Europe, Latin America, Asia were locking down again. The popular Christmas markets in Austria and Germany shuttered for yet another year. And even if the pandemic finally abates, which it will at some point, there will be many issues left in its wake. Labor shortages, the necessity of reducing our travel carbon footprint, and certainly diversity within the upper ranks of our industry. But we are a resilient industry, and I cannot wait to see how we tackle some of these issues as we continue to ride this bumpy road of recovery. So there's a ton of highlights from the conference. Carolina, I wanted to kick it over to you and see what some of yours were.
I think you're absolutely right. Networking was the highlight of the event, although content was great, and I'm going to share most of my insights from content, but we were in a bit of a collective travel therapy there, right? So people gathered there were first happy to reunite, to meet in person, to reconnect. And then there was this optimist. We were sure we were, and we still are sure that the worst is over, and that the travel renaissance is going to bring a ton of opportunities, especially to those that are more curious and observant of those changes and permanent transformations happening in our industry. So for me, there were, as usual, a lot of insights. Stephen Kaufer's last participation as CEO of TripAdvisor, and he highlighted that companies' reinvention has to happen during good and prosperous times, since it's much harder to do it under a crisis, and it can lead to bad decisions. He also talked about travel subscriptions and talked about TripAdvisor Plus. Once again, one of the main discussed trends in the conference, but the investors panel didn't seem too excited about the subscription model for travel. what they say is that it's a very low frequency purchase that differs from video or music streaming, for example. So that remains to be seen. Travel and Leisure is one of the many companies that is investing in that model and investing with confidence. So we'll see. Data analysis and intelligence is a forever present topic and was debated a lot again. But the main thing is that we've talked about this today, is that although we have already lots of data from clients and information, it is time to apply them. It is time to truly improve the journey, make it simpler, seamless, frictionless. And we've been talking about that a lot, but not much has been done. And I understand that the past years hasn't allowed that as much, but we'll see how it plays for the next year. I really enjoyed Nelson Boyce's presentation. He's the managing director of travel from Google, and he presented 3 travel trends, being more meaningful tourism, more inclusive, and more responsible. He showed some internal data, research data, stating that 86% of the travelers of color said cultural engagement was key deciding factor for destinations. And 74% seek out information specific to their cultural and ethnic background. As for sustainability, over 50% of travelers say that environmental and sustainable considerations are important when considering potential travel. There was, though, an uncomfortable panel about this topic led by our brilliant Phocuswright editor, Kevin May. And it has become clear that it's time for tourism to acknowledge its real impact and really do something about it. Shrewd as usual, Steve Hafner, the CEO of Kayak and OpenTable, said that he believes that travel has a social impact that is very relevant and it outweighs the environmental impact. And then he said that he doesn't fly business. So that was a surprise. Steve also commented on Kayak's hotel operation initiative, with the first hotel fully operating in Miami. And he also announced 2 others coming soon to our region in Playa del Carmen in Mexico. And to understand why this move, he mentioned that the company wants to make the most of existing Kayak's demand and use these operations as an opportunity to learn about hospitality management, to invest in software solutions to independent hoteliers. Steve was also very transparent when talking about long-term transformations in our work format. Remote work and hybrid models are here to stay, as we've seen today as well. And he even asked the audience who was eager to go back to the office, and not many hands rose. So Anu Hariharan from YC Continuity seems to agree with Hafner, and she stated that remote-first companies will have a big competitive advantage in the upcoming years. That means that business travel is forever changed. It doesn't mean, though, that it won't come back, but it will, with new needs and desired attributes from travelers. Then we had Fred Lalonde's talk, which was also very interesting. Hopper recently got $175 million investment to grow its new business model, shifting from consumer app to being a travel fintech. And he showed Hopper's positive results during the pandemic when compared to its competitors, and credited that to the fact that they now sell products such as insurance for lost connections, price lock, and others. According to his data, 56% of travelers are willing to pay for products that make travel more controlled, safe, and with less friction, something that we've discussed here today. And it seems that it's true in Latin America as well. If there was a segment that felt a little bit less the effects of the pandemic, was the short-term rentals. So Madeleine presented a Phocuswright research where it becomes clear, and we've seen that in Trisha's panel and the startup panels, that it becomes clear that hotels and short-term rentals are competing for the same client. And the main factor that favors short-term rentals is identity, character, and local immersion. And on the other hand, for hotels, the main factors are service and consistency. Sam Shank, the head of customer experience at Airbnb, said that the company will continue to invest in hotel integration, making borders even more blurred. This is somewhat different than what Expedia decided, keeping each business model separated. So we'll see how short-term rentals and hotels face each other in the upcoming year. And then we have Peter Kern, Expedia CEO, closing the event, and the company will focus mainly on B2C through intelligent use of data, becoming an app-first company. So he said that they want to become an app-first company, having a super app, but not becoming a super app. So that's a really interesting point of view. So to sum it up, to me, there are two different approaches to the upcoming years. Travel companies, they are looking at this as a travel comeback, meaning they are picking up where they stopped, and travel companies, they are looking at this as a renaissance opportunity, reinventing themselves and the industry along with them. So it was a great event, Pete, and I felt pretty good to be there.
Yes, indeed, Carolina. And it was so great to see you as well as so many of our industry friends and colleagues. So for me, as I always do, I enjoyed the innovation pitches and the technologies that are being developed to address some of the biggest friction points that are caused, have been caused by the pandemic, as well as that we know are part of the travel process. We saw companies focused on accessible travel, business travel tech, live video shopping, a few applications of hospitality tech, including revenue management, cross-sell, upsell, and lastly, fintech. The winner of Summit, which is our startup pitch competition, was UTip, which is a cashless and contactless tipping app that allows travelers to seamlessly tip bellmen and other service workers. The winner of Launch, which is a product launch event for companies of all stages, was Upstay, which is a hospitality tech company that helps hotels upsell room categories and sell additional ancillaries. And Upstay has a considerable focus on the Latin America market. So for all of the hoteliers that are listening in, make sure to check them out. And for all of you who were not able to attend physically or even virtually, you can view all of the recorded sessions on the Phocuswright YouTube channel. And I also thoroughly enjoyed the 5 industry roundtables that we hosted on the first afternoon of Center Stage, which brought together leaders from various industry sectors to collaborate and make sense of the current market conditions and to lay the groundwork for new paths to growth. The roundtables were closed sessions to facilitate open conversation and brainstorming. And the topics were technology, hotels and hospitality, intermediaries, traveler behavior, and lastly, innovation and startups. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the innovation and startups table, which was led by Chris Hemmeter from Thayer Ventures, Lisa Katsuraki from eTraveli, and Morgan Lesney from Cambone Partners. And we had about 30 or 35 attendees who were mostly startups, eager to learn and ask questions about fundraising, valuations, how to know when you've truly found that product market fit, and many other topics. And we tackled lots, and we heard amazing experiences from both the experts as well as the attendees. And I think the biggest takeaway from that session was that while the lure of raising venture capital is definitely a big one, and money is actually fairly available for startups looking to scale, the startups need to be very cautious when they're raising money, and they need to have a clear plan all the way through exit, and they need to partner with investors and share the same values and principles. And there were plenty of stories shared about how fundraising went wrong because of a mismatch between the investor and the startup, or the money was raised prior to truly finding that product market fit. So these roundtables are a core part of our event offering, and we will continue to run them virtually on our Travel Tech Leaders platform, as well as at Phocuswright Europe, which is going to be happening in late June. And of course, the Phocuswright conference next year, which will be in Phoenix in mid-November. So speaking of 2022, Carolina, I know we asked this question on the panels as well as you asked it to Alejandro. It'll be interesting to see what topics we're discussing at next year's conference. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think it's going to be somewhat better, but still full of uncertainty. So I believe recovery and renaissance topics will still be present, but this time a little bit more focused on permanent changes and new behaviors that we've learned from this by then 3 years of pandemic. For example, business travel. We know by now that work as we knew it is forever changed, and we have to wait and see what's the real impact on business travel. So I guess we'll be discussing some outcomes by then. Also, the battle between hotels and short term rentals will remain a hot topic. For example, in Brazil, we're seeing some traditional hotel chains moving into the short term rental space as well. So that's an interesting evolution to check. Also, we discussed digital transactions that have been accelerating throughout the world and in Latin America as well. So I expect to see a lot of new tech solutions for the traveler's journey, as well as B2B solutions. So I can't wait to see what the innovators will come up with. I believe that inspired by Hopper, we'll see some more travel fintech approaches, more payment and insurance. Andres Malenke from Turismo City mentioned that as well. So as traveling remains an unstable activity, we might see consumers looking for a more controlled way of traveling. I wish to see that sustainability and responsibility discussions grow and that we become less uncomfortable with the topic, on the other hand, it becomes more present and more natural in our industry. I think another discussion might be over tourism as international travel somewhat resumes. What happens with the main destinations? Do they come back as usual to make up for lost time? Or do they work in a different approach? Do DMOs have different strategies now? So that's an interesting topic. And finally, mergers and acquisitions, as well as funding. So we had a lot of discussions about specs and going public and things like that. So they're very US specific somewhat, but I think discussions about mergers and acquisitions and funding are always part of the conversation. So that lead us to who will survive, who will merge, who won't be there. So I expect to see a lot of new things coming out of this crisis period, because using the Latin Americans example, that we are used to adversity, so we become more creative. That means that everybody can do that, become resilient and creative. So a lot of new topics might come. We'll see. So that's what I expect to see next year in Phoenix speech. I hope I'm okay with that.
Yes, and I hope we're not talking about the next variant that's coming our
No.
way. I hope we've managed to kind of make it through this period of challenge, which we've been in for the last 18 months. And I also hope that online events are in the rear view mirror to some degree, because it's so much better to get together in person, which I think you can agree with. So, but this is a great platform. This particular event is really a nice way to bring together the community of travel leaders that are focused on the Latin America market. And we're seeing a growing number of Latin America travel leaders year after year at our November event. And we knew that this region deserved its own dedicated event. So hopefully we can take it from a virtual environment and move it into a physical environment, which is where it belongs. But over just the last few hours, this resilient group shared experiences, discussed and debated some data and some trends, and gained a little bit of consensus on what it's going to take to navigate the recovery. And we, of course, appreciate the support of our sponsors, PM Web and Elo, and our partners, as well as Carolina and our close friends at Mappy, to surface the unique challenges and opportunities in the Latin America travel market. And we hope that today's focus on the region and gathering of the relevant players was interesting and impactful for you all. We published a lot of research lately to help you navigate this incredibly unpredictable market. And as an attendee of this event, we are offering you an opportunity to save 50% on any reports that you'd like to buy. So we'll send you out a code over email. And we, as it goes at Phocuswright, we have a comprehensive view of the different travel markets around the world. And Latin America represents a really key part of it. So we thank you for being part of this event. And again, hopefully we can do it in person next year in December of 22. Our team will remain on the platform now. If anybody wants to say hello or ask us a question or give us some feedback. So you have to just click over to the networking happy hour and you can put something in the chat in the live discussion, and we'll respond to it there. So thanks again for joining us today, Carolina. It's always great to see you, and we look forward to seeing you over in the chat room.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was great having you.